Welcome to Census Records Research. This video will give you a brief overview of federal and other censuses for family research. The U.S. Constitution mandates that the population be counted every 10 years. The census data is used for federal funding purposes to states, communities, etc. So, why use census records in family research? They offer information about our ancestors at a particular moment in time. We can follow their movement every 10 years. Census records give us biographical information such as age, occupation, immigration. We also get a community picture. Who was living nearby? If we have trouble locating our ancestors, we can use the FAN method for family or friends, acquaintances and neighbors to trace others nearby and perhaps locate our ancestors. Spelling will vary. Ages are approximate. Use names of others in the family to stay on track. Birthplace can also change depending on who gave the information. Enumerators recorded what they were told, but human error can occur. View the original document if possible for additional information. Variations in indexing can occur from one company to another. View more than one database for the same information. For example, this entry from the 1940 U.S. Federal Census could be James Speak or James Grow, depending on the indexer. The general rule when researching is start with yourself and work backwards. For the census, start with the latest available census, which is 1950, and work backwards. Use what you know to locate your ancestor on a census record. Remember, less is more. Use the exact search function with caution. You can miss out on variations. Each census reflects the times in which it was taken. Entering the search term Native American may bypass results with individuals listed as Indian. The same is true of African American, which may rule out results for individuals listed as Black. Each census is unique, beginning with congressional legislation that specifies the information collected and the method gathered. Since Congress's choices would have focused on issues of the day, each census is actually a source of information about the times our ancestors lived in, as well as our ancestors. The 72-year rule, which, for privacy reasons, restricts public access to, quote, personally identifiable information, unquote, until 72 years after it was collected. The U.S. Census Bureau conducts the census. The National Archives and Records Administration maintains the records. If you are interested in learning more, this first website contains summaries of the data collected, and the second lists specifics including questions, enumerator instructions, etc. Databases with searchable census records can be found at Ancestry, Find My Past, MyHeritage, and Heritage Quest online, or check your local library to see what's available. You can sign up for a free account at FamilySearch.org to search their records. Let's look at the various census records. Shown on this table are the first 6 federal censuses. These first censuses only recorded the names of the heads of households, adding tally marks to enumerate the others in household. The date column shows the enumeration date, or the, quote, snapshot date, unquote. Enumerators were to collect all information as of that date. There are unique details for each of the early censuses. 1790, there's a significant record loss and only had 5 columns. The 1800 expanded the age categories. The 1810 manufacturing information was added to the census to find out what was produced and the value. The 1820 census enumerated age ranges of slaves and free persons of color and collected occupational data. 1830 was the first census to use pre-printed forms. 1840 was the first census to have a second enumeration page per household. Questions included education and occupation. Again, a significant number of federal censuses were lost due to fire, flood, war, etc. So check the database you're using for information on which records are available. The 1850 census was the first to include names and information for all free inhabitants. We also have a second population schedule for slave inhabitants, which was not taken in every state. These individuals are listed by gender and age only. The 1860 is almost the same as 1850 with both free and slave schedules. On the free schedule, German immigrants were asked to provide their specific German state of birth, such as Baden, Bavaria, Hanover. African Americans listed on the free schedule were free, either through manumission or by birth, before the Civil War began. The slave schedule has listings by slave owner. The 1870 was the first census taken after the Civil War, so this is the first that lists by name ancestors who were formerly enslaved. The race option was expanded, though all Asians were classified as Chinese. The 1880 census includes 38 states, plus territories covering much of the western United States, including Indian territories and Alaska. The best addition to the census is relationship to the head of the house. Other additions include address, marital and employment status, birthplace of the person and the father and mother, plus citizens with special needs. The 1890 census had each family's information gathered on its own page, with additions such as questions about farm or home ownership, military service, number of years in the U.S., and whether or not naturalized, as well as whether or not naturalization process had begun. Then in 1921, the Commerce Department building, where the census records were housed at the time, had a fire that destroyed all but about 1% of the data collected. In response, Congress created the National Archives and Records Administration to house the censuses, which opened in 1934. 1890 also had a special enumeration of Union veterans and widows intended to help Union veterans locate fellow soldiers to support their pension claims and to provide data for pension legislation. Due to the rise of immigration, these two censuses, the 1900 and 1910, include questions on year of immigration, number of years in the U.S., and current naturalization status. This is also the first census to collect the month and year of birth. Both the 1900 and 1910 federal censuses included a modified form that was used on reservations and in counties containing a considerable number of Native Americans. The first few questions were the same as on the general population schedule and included more information such as fraction of white blood and tribal information. This special form is different from the federal Indian census rolls taken regularly on reservations back as early as 1885. More on those later. The 1920 U.S. federal census represents the nation's focus on the U.S. military, overseas territories, and the changing boundaries in Europe after World War I. Enumerators were to record an immigrant's year of naturalization as well as the language spoken. Immigrants and children of immigrants were asked to provide the specific province, state, or region of their birth and of their parents' births. The 1930 census followed the stock market crash of 1929. Enumerators were instructed to fill out an additional 15-question census of unemployment for anyone unemployed. Age at first marriage was added, and U.S. servicemen and women were recorded as a resident of the place where they were stationed. Notice the question about the radio. This question was to measure purchasing trends of the day and American interest in home appliance technology. Notice radio ownership was more prevalent in urban areas and the northern United States than in rural areas and the South. Census questions on the 1940 census were chosen to inform policymakers of issues in housing, employment or unemployment, movement about the country, and income. This was the first census to include a statistical sampling completed by 5% of the people, anyone on lines 14 and 29. An X by a person indicated who provided the information to the enumerator. The 1950 census is the last census available to the public at this time. Remember the 72-year rule we discussed earlier? This census covers 48 states, U.S. territories including Alaska and Hawaii. It was the first to enumerate federal employees and their families living abroad, as well as those in the armed forces and crews of vessels. Because of the increase in population and census staff wages, the number of questions asked of everyone was reduced to 20, and an increase in the number of people asked the supplemental questions from 5%, 2 people per page in 1940, to 20%, 6 people per page in 1950. From 1850 to 1880, non-population schedules were taken to collect data relating to agriculture, mortality, social statistics, and manufacturing. Not every farm was included in the agriculture schedules. Small farms that produced less than $100 worth of products annually were not included. The mortality schedule included those who died in the year prior to the census. Social statistics information of 1850 to 1880 was the government wanting to know the value of real estate, annual taxes, number of schools and libraries, local newspapers, etc. As in the agricultural non-population schedule, small manufacturing operations producing less than $500 worth of goods were not included on that schedule. An act of Congress of July 4, 1884 required the Bureau of Indian Affairs to begin recording an annual census on most Indian reservations in the United States. These are different from the U.S. Census Indian population schedules discussed earlier. The Indian census rolls were taken from 1885 to 1940, but there is not a census for every reservation or group for every year. Most states and many territories ran their own censuses. Dates and information varies. Some of these state and territorial censuses have not survived. International censuses for many countries are also available. Anne Lanehart's state census records, available at many libraries, and Alice Reichholtz's Red Book, now accessible through RootsWeb, are also excellent sources of information about state, territorial, and international censuses. This is a brief overview of information in the censuses. For more information, please check out our events calendar for our census class and other events, or contact us at the Midwest Genealogy Center.